Was the record?
Years ago, at the urging of my colleague Jeremy Wilbur, we agreed that we needed to revise the comprehensive plan, which had not been updated since 1964. And we did it. In 2018, we adopted a plan, and thank you, Kirk. I mean, we couldn't have done it without Kirk. And when the plan came about, I went, "Oy," because the two biggest things that came out of that were a great need for housing and a great desire to continue to protect even more our environment. And I get that that can all be done, but I think it, on its face, that seems like a huge compromise there, that just two opposite things. And I reached out to some of the brightest people I know in Woodstock and said, I need your help. And out of that plan came the Housing Committee and came the Zoning Revision Committee, and ultimately came the Housing Oversight Task Force, which has spent the last 2.5 years working with the planner. Actually, they spent 3 or 4 months, and mostly Deborah and I put together, mostly Deborah, a grant to hire a planning consultant. We got one of the top consultants in the state, and they then proceeded to spend 2 years and multiple drafts. And one of the things I just want to remind everybody is that we're not ready to adopt this today or tomorrow even. I don't want it to languish forever, but we want to get it right, or as right as we can. And that doesn't mean necessarily we're going to get a perfect document, but it means we're going to listen to what everybody has to say. And I'm guessing over 100 changes have been made since we started this easily. We're listening to what folks have to say. So we encourage this input, we encourage the dialogue. And I ask everybody to continue to look at the document and give us feedback, because it's important. This came from the comprehensive plan. It came from what the public asked for. And we want to we're working very hard to get this right. So with that, I will just remind everybody, we're going to have a couple more public hearings on top of this Q&A session. I'm going to reopen the public hearing on November 21st. And then I anticipate either the first or the second meeting in December, we'll reopen it yet again. And as you look over the document, if you have comments, send them to me, send them to the Oversight Committee, because we are keen on getting this right. And with that, I'll turn it over to Deborah and the group. Thank you, guys.
Thank you. Stefan is not on with him. We need to stand fast or we need to.
So thanks to those for that great stuff. Everything I've since said. I'm Catherine Keegan, co-chair of the Housing Committee, and this over here is my co-chair, Susan Goldman. The Housing Committee is very glad to be co-hosting this question and answer session today with the Housing Oversight Task Force. First off, I want to thank you all for being here. The zoning changes are a very important issue in our community, and everybody has questions and opinions. And we're going to do our best to respond to the issues that came up at the public hearing last month. In addition, we've received many excellent questions in our housing email inbox, and we've added those for today's discussion as well. Before we get into the program, I think it's helpful to explain what the Housing Committee does. We research and advocate for ways to help create affordable housing in Woodstock. We are an advisory committee to the town board, and we do not have authority to build housing. We can make recommendations to the town board based on our research about what could be built based on available land, funding, and other factors. The Housing Oversight Task Force, as Phil just said, was formed 2 years ago to update our zoning code. Their goal is to make housing more available to people from a range of income levels and backgrounds, while preserving our town's unique character and scale, while continuing to protect our natural environment. The members of the HOTF work with Dan Stoltenberg, a consultant, community planning and environmental associates on drafting the update. The members of the HOTF are the most knowledgeable about the proposed changes in the code, and we hope you will take advantage of this opportunity to ask questions. We've passed around index cards so you can write down the questions during the first part of this program, and then members of the housing community will come and collect them. As I just mentioned, we've received many excellent and comprehensive questions from some of you already, and we hope the responses will provide a range of information. If you have a follow-up question, please write it down on a card. Pick it up. Come over bring it to the panel to you. We understand that everyone has different opinions about housing code. The purpose of this meeting today is not to express our personal opinions, to ask questions. There will be plenty of opportunity to share your opinion at the next public hearing, which is the best place to let the town board know what you're thinking. And I have just heard from Bill that the next hearing will be on November 21st. While the discussion is meant to be informational, it's also a good place to raise points that will be helpful to the HOTF as they continue to refine the zoning code. Many of the most recent changes came from our community members. We are all listening to your good points. And before we get into the panel discussion, I'd like to add that the Housing Committee is looking for new members and everyone is welcome. Please write to the committee at housing@woodstocknewyork.org if you'd like to have a conversation about joining the committee, or you can come speak with me. Also want to point out that we have cookies and cider over in the kitchen, and we have some handouts in the back. Now, I'm very pleased that we have 4 members of the HOTF here today. All 4 are professionals in their chosen fields, and they have taken their personal time to volunteer on this task force. Deborah Mayertwan is our HOTF co-chair. Deborah is the policy consultant and a community advocate who has brought professional experience in diverse fields to contribute to the needs of Woodstock, where she has lived for over 4 decades. At the heart of Deborah's professional work and volunteer service, whether in food and housing security, agriculture and the face of climate change, or environmental, community, economic sustainability, is an abiding commitment to building bridges to meaningful public participation and inclusiveness, and to reaching through controversy to find cause. Deborah also serves on the Housing Advisory Committee for Ulster. Kirk Ritchie, HOTF co-chair. Kirk has been a resident of Woodstock for 28 years and a longtime volunteer for the town. His volunteer work includes sharing the town's comprehensive plan, which was adopted in 2018. Kirk worked for 23 years in the corporate digital technology industry, where he was a team leader. Prior to that, Kirk managed heavy construction projects in New York City, including the renovation of Grand Central Station mezzanine. He has recently been advisor to crime prevention media at Bard College and launched the Woodstock Housing Alliance Community Land Trust last year. Judith Kerman is vice chair of the Woodstock Planning Board, having served on the board since 2012. She was also a member of the Complete Streets Committee. Dr. Kerman has skills in computer mapping for planning purposes. She moved to Woodstock in 2011 after more than 25 years as a university administrator, including positions as academic dean and associate vice president, and 14 years as an English professor. Hello, English major. A poet, musician, and artist, she runs Apple Press, a small independent publisher. Jeff Collins has been a resident of Woodstock for 24 years. He is a software development manager and is currently serving as interim chief technology officer at 340X. Jeff is also the president of the Woodstock Library Board and on the board of directors for Family of Woodstock. Jeff has been running for a seat on the Ulster County Legislature so that he can help solve the county's housing crisis, as well as create increased mental health and addiction treatment services. And now, following Tuesday's election, Jeff is our Ulster County Legislature elect. Congratulations to Jeff. So now I think Kirk is going to share a few words with us.
Okay.
Kirk?
Thank you, Kathy. It's very thorough. That's great. Great. And anybody's looking for a seat, there's some empty ones here in the second rows. I just also want to thank everyone for coming. So great to see people interested in housing in our town. And the Housing Oversight Task Force, which is what I'm going to speak to right now, as Bill has already alluded to, and definitely also, our intent from the beginning was to bring the details of the statement of purpose that was articulated in the comprehensive plan to bring the details forward regarding zoning. Now, the only thing I wanted to make clear about zoning is that the only thing we focused on in our efforts was the element of creating more housing opportunities in our town. We didn't do anything related to single-family homes. We didn't do anything related to other factors, housing or land use in our town. We simply focused on how multiple unit buildings could be incorporated into the land use of our town. And then associated with that, we also focused on the other big value that was expressed in the comprehensive plan, and that is the conservation of our environment in our town. So we sought in our efforts to work with Nan Stoltenberg to create a sense of harmony between what is often seen as very contentious between housing and environmental conservation. So to harmonize those two elements is what one of the efforts we were making. That's one of the reasons why we introduced some of the factors we'll talk about today in the company. So that was our mission as a committee, as a task force. And Deborah and I, as co-chairs, we worked really early on trying to establish a sense of safety and respect of the members of the task force, so that everybody felt empowered to speak what they felt and what they experienced. That is important to them. So we created a high functional group, in my opinion, and we were able to, over the last 2 years, go into really an immense amount of detail. It's been very painstakingly an effort. It's been very, and sometimes very challenging because of the details associated with land use law. We also had some serious, besides Nan Stoltenberg, we brought in John Lyons, the town's land use lawyer, and advised to evaluate the entire revision of code. And he, along with Nan, identified numerous aspects of that are non-housing related issues associated with the current code. We then referred that over to the zoning revisions committee, and they are looking at it. But John Lyons and Nan Stoltenberg extensive review of this code before we released it to the public. We also then had, this is our third round of a version released to the public. And we took comments associated with version 1 and version 2, and now version 3, and we have incorporated what we felt were the important comments that were relative to what we were attempting to accomplish. And any other comments that were outside of those that we received, we either referred those again over to the zoning revisions committee or to the town board. One other thing we did is we created a list as we were going on, a list of recommendations that were outside of the zoning code that would be what we phrase as recommended policy changes that the town board must own the responsibility to adopt that would support the housing efforts in our town. So policy is an important aspect of this effort in our town. And it's up to the town board to identify that responsibility. That list was given to the housing committee, and now the housing committee is given that to the town board. So that completes the journey of that particular aspect of recommending. And part of that recommendation was at the top of it was enforcement, as many of you are concerned about in our town, as we all should be. So enforcement is a big part of the recommendation. We have to strengthen the ability for this town to enforce its law and its regulations. So that's a real quick summary. I wanted to just finalize on one thing. We're trying to build housing for people, seniors, musicians, other artists, young people, workers, volunteers for our fire department, and our EMTs. Those are the people that we want to help out. Much of that housing will be what we would consider as moderate income housing. People that already are making money, but just aren't making enough to live in this town, because this town's become very expensive to live in. So we're not seeking to provide housing necessarily for simply what most people may think of in their minds what affordable housing is. But we are seeking to build housing and create land use laws to enable that housing to be built, to supply an adequate amount of inventory of housing for those people that you see every day in our town. And some of those people that you don't see any longer because they've already been forced out. And there's a lot of people that have been forced out. So thank you for your listening, and thank you for being here today. And we hope that this event will be very helpful to you in answering some of your questions. Thanks for listening.
If anybody has a question, I'm gonna come.
You want to explain how that's going to be done?
But as I mentioned before, you can write your question on the card. And read your front, and we'll read them out and pass what's going on. Hold on. Already. And we're gonna start with some questions that came up at the public hearing.
We'll do the same thing with the chat. It will come to me and Deborah, and we will read those after we read the cards.
Okay.
We have some hands up, but there's one thing I failed to mention. That's typical, I forgot to mention. But one of the aspects of this task force, and Bill alluded to this, is that there's a New York State regulation in our state that if a town updates its comprehensive plan, one of its primary responsibilities initially is to update its land use laws to reflect the values and the issues associated in that new revised comprehensive plan. So that too was an incentive that Bill called us together so that we could do that. So we're seeking to basically be compliant with the New York State regulations by writing this code up and revising our code. And hopefully you'll soon learn more about that in the coming minutes. Maybe we should ask people to turn off their cell phones while things are happening.
Yeah.
We're not asking you to throw them away. We just want you to silence them for the duration of our meeting. Okay. Yes. Thank you. Yeah, Deborah.
Oh, sorry, we're gonna get going in a minute. I'm sure you have questions, on a variety of aspects of what we're proposing. And we're gonna do our best to answer them today. Those that we, cannot completely answer, or that we need to, we will be, providing those responses. We're also gonna be compiling all of the questions and the responses, and those are gonna be available through the town website. So we're doing this with all of the responses, all the questions we've gotten in our evaluation this year, and most recently, and through the public.
Right. I guess I forgot on Tuesday. All right, what do we do?
Our first question, as I said, these are all coming out of the public hearing, things that are there. And Kurt has always addressed this, that many in our community are wondering, why do we need to update the housing code at all? And so can you explain why we're doing this now, in addition to what Kurt just said about the current plan?
I'm gonna answer that first question.
We need to speak as clearly as possible because people are having trouble with.
Okay, thanks for that. By the way, we do have a whole Zoom that's going on, so I don't know how many people are on it, but thank you for attending on Zoom.
Why do you turn this up?
Yeah.
being picked up by that iPhone too. That's probably why. The room is not a good.
Okay, we're ready. So the first, Kirk's already mentioned that we do need to update the zoning to comply with the comprehensive plan. That's just a state requirement, so that's an initial reason to do this. Secondly, the affordable housing situation in this town is in a crisis. It's been sharpened during the COVID pandemic. We know many people who want to live here who can't live here. As president of the Woodstock Library Board, I know that my employees cannot live here. They can't afford to live here. That's a shame that we're asking people to work in our town. They cannot afford to live in our town. So we need to address that and address that quickly and soon to make that available. But that's my answer. I think that's it. Somebody have more to say on that.
I think we're doing this now also because, we have, as said, we're following the state law to bring our, zoning code in compliance with the alignment of the comprehensive plan. We have to do that. But we also have a community that has a lot of needs, and we have an environment we care very deeply about. And so we felt it was a good moment. Again, given the direction we had in the comprehensive plan itself, that we look at best practices and we bring in some expert assistance to help guide us so that we could come up with recommendations that we share with you that are going to help us to solve a problem that we are facing here and is happening all around us.
I think there are a couple of issues, several issues. One is, as Deborah just said, affordable housing is a problem like all over the country. Middle housing that used to be like the little 1,000-square-foot ranch houses that I live in one of those, they're not being built anymore. So that's one problem. On the other hand, we have, as we all love and value, this gorgeous and fragile physical environment. So our job was to figure out a way to focus the zoning code, as the comp plan has already asked us to do, on both more affordable housing to the extent that it can be done. And somebody has to have the money to build. It's not something that's going to happen by nature. And protect the environment. So we have to be clear about where you can build things and what you can build, and require affordability if anything is built. And that's essentially what we've done in the new code. The current code is strong in some places. One of the things we have that's really excellent is the wetlands and watercourse law. It's a good law. But we have other areas that are weak. And one of the things we want to do today is to make clear how and where the changes that we are proposing strengthen the code in ways that need to be strengthened.
Perfect segue into the next question. So we know that this process that the agency embarked upon 2 years ago involved professional land use and planning consultant. Can the members here of the panel of the task force share with us the substantive changes that were made to the code during their process?
Okay. I'll start off by saying, so there are two sections of the code that we addressed. One is subdivision code and one is the zoning code. The subdivision code is what happens when we take a piece of land and make it into multiple pieces of like multiple properties. So that is one area that we addressed. And what we did there is we changed the code to require that any major subdivision, that's the subdivision of land into more than 5 pieces, any major subdivision must follow certain new rules. Five more, thank you, 5 or more. And one of those rules is that half of that land, there must be contiguous half of the land in contiguous area must be preserved as a conservation. Okay, and that means forever, permanent conservation. And we've seen a scenario where there's recent developments that took our law into effect, even though it doesn't apply to them, and actually did that. And that created the largest conservation of land in Woodstock, bigger than the Columbia. That was a recent subdivision. Future subdivisions may have even larger ones. They'll put more and more land in conservation. So that's working. We're saving land away in contiguous spaces, and that's a good thing. The next thing is that we've made in the subdivision 15% of any unit built must be affordable housing. Okay, and that's actually the county asked us to make it 10%. We made it 15%. We wanted more than what the county asked for. It must be indistinguishable and segregated with the other housing. Integrated. Thank you. Sorry, not segregated. Integrated. That backward. That's why I get all four of us here. And if we've looked at, we've seen plans. The plan, for example, was they put housing in the plan, but it was often a point. That's not what we want. It was we want if someone builds affordable housing, it's going to be part of the entire plan, and it's have to be built at the same time. I've heard of developments in other areas where they promise affordable housing, but they never build it. They just keep, well, I'll do it someday. But that promise, that never comes true. With our code, it has to be done at the same time as everything else is done. And the next thing is when you take a piece of land and divide it into smaller pieces of land, right? You're subject to what's called the zone, and the size of the zone. So we talk about R3, R5, R8. What that means is an R3 means that each buildable lot must be at least 3 acres in size. R5 means each lot must be at least 5 acres in size. R8 must be each must be 8 acres in size. So what we have said, so if that's, let me use an example. If you take 60 acres and you divide it into 12 lots in an R5, you have 5 acres. Sorry, 60 acres in an R5, you divide into 12 lots, right? That's as of today's code. Under the new code, it's not the size of it that counts, it's the net acreage. The net acreage is the size of the land minus buffers, minus the wetlands, minus the streams, minus the slopes. So 60 acres of land minus things you cannot build on is the net acreage. So 60 acres will probably become maybe 50 acres or 45 acres. And that means you can only build 9 or 10 units. So we're actually reducing the number of units you can build in subdivision by taking away those areas that are unbuildable. And that's a way to conserve more of the environment. That's a large piece of what we're doing. I'll pass it on to others for the actual housing piece.
So I guess one of the things, not quite sure how to jump into this because there's so many aspects to the housing aspect, the housing part of this. But we created using the comprehensive plan, talking about a housing opportunity, wanted to have a number of different types of housing in our town that could be potentially built in a way that would be more affordable. In some cases, required to be affordable. So right now we have single family homes, we have accessory dwellings. We actually have in our current law, multifamily housing can be built basically in the R5 acres all the way down to the hamlet with special use permit. So that's already in the code, but it has no standard. It has no environmental regulations associated with it. So what we wanted to do in coming up with different housing types was to find ways to create housing potentially that would have more than one unit in a building, but it would look like a single family house. It would be sited using net acreage and environmental standards. One of the things we did, I'm jumping ahead a little bit, but we found in reviewing the current law that the current slope requirement, its prohibition is above 50%. Think about that. So and a lot of planners recommend even going down to 15%. We went down to 25%. So every step of the way, we look to find ways to put buildings on land in that would fit the land, that would not overwhelm the land, that would protect the environment. We also created, I'm trying to think, so a duplex is currently permitted. That's right, 2 houses in a building. We specifically added, again, multiple unit housing is permitted, but we specifically identified 3 unit and 4 unit buildings. Again, because we felt that they could be done at scale and character of other buildings in our town. And that's what we put in the regulations. And we identified a way that the planning board could evaluate those proposals for a 3 or 4 unit building in a way that was still very a good environmental, would take into account all the criteria, but it would be more difficult than a special use permit, but not a full environmental review. Correct me if I'm wrong. Okay. Well, I'm sorry. Well,
More difficult than
more difficult than a building permit, but
not as difficult.
but what we're looking at is if the planning board determines that the context for the site requires a more extensive, they will then require a full environmental
Special.
especially
Full. SPR.
Site plan review.
site plan review.
Mhm.
Acronyms.
Juice on the planning board, so she figures my guys here to get us through some of these. I'm just trying to think.
Let me speak to this a little bit.
Okay, I just wanted to say one other thing is that we have required some affordable units throughout the different types of housing that we're proposing. So we're not just saying people can build housing anywhere. We're trying to direct it, and we're trying to talk about its character and scale, and we're also trying to make it more affordable.
Yeah, one of the issues in planning board work is how much power the planning board has to say, you can't do this or you have to do that. And one of the new things in this law is for everything that comes before us, we can specify what is called the building envelope. That's exactly where does it go on the land, including septic systems, including driveways, so that people can't just go put it anywhere they want to. And again, the fact that we are excluding from the net acreage, wetlands, water courses, buffers, and steep slopes, there's smaller number of lots that are possible in some subdivisions, not in every place. The fact that we are requiring affordable units, 15% rounded up, in a 3-plex, in a 4-plex, if we ever have 8-plexes, and I don't know that we ever will, and in subdivisions. So if somebody's going to divide their land into 5 or more pieces, 15% of that is going to have to be designated for affordable housing. They may have to partner with somebody like Rocco to make sure that happens, but they'll be required to do it. They can't just build high-end houses on all 5 lots.
I think it might help to do a comparative contrast with current and existing in this particular area. I think this is a very difficult area to understand and very difficult area for us to explain without giving examples. So in today's existing code, anyone can build a duplex any place in Woodstock, correct? I'm looking at my friend. Any place in Woodstock. In our code, they can build a duplex any place in Woodstock. That hasn't changed. A triplex is essentially a duplex plus one affordable unit. The triplex must have one affordable unit. So what we're saying is, if you want to build a duplex, hey, once you add a third affordable unit, then do it anyway. Okay, it's got to be the same scale and size, it still fits, we get an affordable unit inside. We would not otherwise have. Okay, in today's code, anyone can build a multi-family house in any R5 or lower of any size. Woodstock had 6,800 residents. These are the water houses.
We're gonna need to unmute it.
I just want to. This process, and so that nothing will be approved from our proposals that are adopted on any property unless they can demonstrate that they can, that there's sufficient water and also area for wastewater management. That's on private properties, and obviously we have limited this percent of municipal water and sewer. The systems actually aren't so small, the districts are small, so they don't really, so they could accommodate more houses, but right now they don't. So that also limits where, certain developments are not gonna happen outside, water and sewer districts. We're gonna be, there'll be less dense. All right, next question. We've gotten a lot of questions about Woodstock National, a large development that was brought to the planning board last summer. And the community had an opportunity to learn about their proposal in a pre-planning session, which is one of the improvements in the new code. Panel members, explain how a large development such as Woodstock National would fare under the current code and how it would be regulated with the updated code.
I think the most important thing to start off this conversation with is that the proposal from Woodstock National was designed to be legal under the existing code. Everything they presented in their sketch plan was legal under the existing code. The golf course, the airport, everything is legal under the existing code. If we do nothing, that's what they will build. What we've done, not in anticipation of that, but in anticipation for our town and our community and our character, is to make the requirement of 50% of the land be contiguously put into conservation. So the roughly 400 acres of Woodstock National that's in Woodstock, 200 acres must go into permanent conservation easements. That does not mean golf courses. That means it cannot be touched. Maybe they can put a path here that people can walk on, but that's all they can do to that land. It's 200 acres. So they cannot build a golf course under the new proposed code. In addition, the existing code has no requirement at all for affordable housing, 0%. They cannot have built one unit of affordable housing in Woodstock National under the existing code. Under our code, they have to build 15%. I know the plan is for more than that, but the current plan has whatever you're going to build off in the top corner away from everybody else segregated. And no promise it actually gets built. In our code, it's got to be built in an integrated manner at the same time as the rest of the subdivision. Okay. Then lastly, the net acreage is the third piece of that. Under the existing code, all of the entire acreage, no matter whether it's a stream or a pond or wetlands or steep slopes, counts for an available place to build a house. Under our code, that does not count. So the net acreage might not be 400 acres, it might be 350 acres, it might be 200 acres. That's a very ecologically sensitive area, or maybe even less than that. We don't know. No one's done the study yet. That's going to limit the number of units they can build to a much smaller number. So we have done a lot, not in anticipation of them because we didn't know about them. We started this code up. But what we've done is make their development very different if they ever do it than it's planned out.
I just want to say one other thing about conservation subdivisions. We're throwing all these terms around, and I realize that it gets confusing. There are glossaries, definition sections in the code. Again, the code is legalese. It's meant for meeting all sorts of regulations beyond what the town has, as well as what the town needs to have in law. But conservation subdivisions, conservation development has been around for a couple of decades in various parts of the country. But very few communities have actually mandated it. What we're doing is really groundbreaking. We are mandating conservation-based development for major subdivisions, and we're also including it in minor subdivisions if it's 15 acres or more, if conditions warrant it. So we're giving the planning board, again, more ability to take more scrutinize these proposals, so that they both provide the housing that is being suggested in a way that is extremely reflective of protecting the environment.
Yes. We've been on for an hour and I think we're on question 3.
So we're gonna.
Well. So we spent an hour on the questions that came out of the planning board meeting. And now we're gonna start answering the questions that you have to do today. And the first, we have a couple of questions related to the planning board. One question is, how do the zoning revisions help the planning board do their job? And secondly, how is the term community character defined for the planning board?
From what?
Community character. So Judy, you want to answer this? Can I say a few things?
Well, I can say a few things.
All right, here.
Go ahead.
This, she's a planning board member. And the vice chair.
Okay, first of all, it gives us much clearer power to require things like hydrology studies and traffic studies. We can do it now, but we can't always enforce it. This gives us the power to do that. Second, it's really important to be able to identify the building envelope. I mentioned that before. When somebody comes to us with a proposal for a subdivision, they are going to have to tell us where the house goes. Now, at the moment, they have to have a perk test. So the county will tell them where they can have a septic field. But that's all. And we can actually say where the road's gonna go, where is the house gonna go, and that is binding. And it's on there, on the plat, so 10 years from now, if they decide to build the house, that's where they have to build the house. Trying to think of some other examples. Well, the community character issue. Yeah, clarity language is a big deal. First of all, planning board was not actually properly defined with its responsibilities in the old code. It's just sort of assumed. Now in the new code, in the proposed code, that is clearly stated. Second of all, definitions are scattered through the whole document. And now they're all in one place. So if you want to find a definition, you can find it, you know where to look for it. So in some cases, definitions are missing.
Yeah.
Yeah, somebody asked a question that came to us about the definition of commercial being put in. It was never there before. It's mentioned in a lot of places in the law, but what does it mean? There was no definition of what commercial meant. Now, there are questions about B&Bs and other kinds of enterprises, and we may have to tweak this a little bit because we got a good question from a citizen, and we will, as we have been all along, look at what the language is and say, yeah, that's something you need to pay attention to. Yeah, another thing, we have people come into planning board all the time and they've got the whole thing planned laid out. They've done the engineering studies, they've done the survey, and they've spent a lot of money. And they could come to us and we could say, no, you can't do that. Or you have to change it this way and that way, and they have wasted money. So we are going, it is required in the new language, in the new code, that they do what's called a pre-sketch plan, where they come into us, and people sometimes do this, but more people love to do it, and particularly for big projects. They have to come into us and say, this is kind of what we're thinking about. Here's the place we want to do it. What do you think? And we can have that discussion and that negotiation before they have spent money on engineering studies and surveys. A good example of how that actually works is Woodstock National, even though that's not the law yet. They came in and they had drawings and they had diagrams and they had experts and they had a lawyer and they had a sustainable golf course guy, which was mostly, blue sky. They wanted to know if we would do this. They didn't let them have a golf course. I mean, even under the current law, you could look at the board and tell that we were not real happy with what they were proposing. Under the new code, we could say, no, you can't put a septic field there. No, you have to integrate all this affordable housing, and you have to actually do it, not just sort of tell us. They did some things that weren't bad. The golf course was bad. And I will tell you that one of our citizens, Ken Panza, pointed out that in the definition of open land, it included golf courses, and we said, oops, gotta fix that. So that is the way the process has worked. And it will mean that when somebody comes to us, they don't have to do the whole 9 years like the Woodstock National people did. They can just say, we're kind of thinking about doing this, and what about a golf course? And we can say, sorry, that's not gonna fly. And then they get into the process of actually making an application, which, by the way, Woodstock National has not done yet. And they are no longer coming in to see us for another meeting because they want to see what happens with the code first. Community character.
I just want to say I appreciate everyone sitting here so patiently, and listening to all of us, each of us speak about this. But the community character issue, it's mentioned in the comprehensive plan as an important element of our future, that we must maintain the community character. Currently, it's very difficult for the planning board to provide that as a reason to say no. And there is very little ability that the planning board would have currently to say no to a project under the current code's definition of community character. We purposely strengthen the definition of community character and what that means in the revised code. The community character aspect, the way Nan expressed it, was the entirety of the town. It's not the buildings, it's not an aesthetic quality, it's not the way the buildings look. It's more of all of the elements of our town that make up our town, quote-unquote town, such as our anchor institutions of our cultural galleries and art schools and the live music element of our town and the other aspects of our character of our town. Okay? So Nan strengthened the language of the community character element. She also was advised, she also was hired by the planning board at one point to advise on this particular issue. And the planning board found it very, very useful for her input on a specific project that is currently under review. So the bottom line is that the new code provides the ability of the planning board to operate within standards and with strength to force a project that comes before them to adhere to what the planning board interprets to be the value and the character of our town. That's what the planning board now has the ability to do. One of the biggest issues with the planning board now is the planning board, if they do not review a project effectively, they can be sued, or the town can be sued, and it leaves the town liable. And it's a huge issue within the current code, because there's a lot of reasons why the planning board cannot, they sort of have to say yes, if you will, because they put the town at risk, liability wise. And so the revised code provides a tremendous amount of standards to enable the planning board to be protected, and they enable the town to be protected based on the decision that the planning board passes on the approval. We have some hands raised that we didn't. That's the one.
So we talk about community character too, so. When my family moved here 24 years ago, there were 7 to 10 kids in my neighborhood. Now there's 0. When we moved here, I don't know, 24 years ago, I don't know what the average age was in town. Right now, it's over 60 years old, is the average age of the residents of this town. So we have had a change in our community character, which I don't think is positive. We've lost young families. We need to be able to encourage and enable young families to live in this town in order for the town to continue to exist as a town, frankly. We could lose our elementary school. We're on the edge of losing it because we do not have young families. To get young families, they need to be able to afford a house. And that's what this code is trying to do, and that's what we're aiming to do. That's the most important thing I'm trying to do. We believe we've accomplished that within this new code.
I just very quickly want to say that the way we drafted the recommendations in the code, it states explicitly that protecting the community character as defined in the comprehensive plan, and there's a whole series of bullets there, is part and parcel of what this law is seeking to protect. And so anyone who comes into the town who wants to do something within the code has to adhere to those community characteristics. And that does, as Kirk was saying, it gives the planning board teeth. It gives the town teeth and a leg to stand on. And this has been proven in case law. So this is really important. And so I would also suggest you look at the definitions in the zoning code, because it's written in plain English, and you can see what the reference is from the comprehensive plan, all the elements included in that. And that's what we want. We want a vibrant community that's inclusive, that protects the environment, and that creates options for people to live and stay.
Oh, we got one more response.
Yeah, at one point in the discussion of the revisions, we were getting, like specific architectural elements that had to be part of a building, like it had to have bay windows, or this kind of a roof, or. It was very specific, and it reminded me of a town that I know in Michigan. I lived in Michigan for a long time. There's a town called Frankenmuth, and in Frankenmuth, it all has to look like Bavaria. It's kind of a joke in Michigan, actually, because it's so tight. Some of the comments we got asked us, what do you mean by to the extent feasible? Or some language like that they feel it's too loose. Well, it's necessary. I'm disabled. The ADA law says to the extent practicable, which means that if somebody would have to tear their store apart to put in an elevator, they can't require it. I can't sue them for not having an elevator. I mean, I can try, but if it's not financially or architecturally practical to try to do that, it's not feasible. And that's the kind of language you have to have in the law. So we have to look at it, we planning board has to look at it and say, what is community character? Well, it is not, 8 townhouses with garages in front of them. That's just not something that fits this town. It might be a fourplex that is 4,000 square feet, which is smaller than a lot of private houses, and looks like a farmhouse, because it fits the character of the town. It is rural, it is relative, it's small in scale. I mean, I live in a house that could accommodate, although it's not going to, 3 800 square foot, no, 3 600 square foot apartments. It isn't, right now it's a private house. And it's not a very big one as Woodstock goes, but it has an addition on it. I'm gonna add an ADU, and it's gonna be donated to the Woodstock Housing Alliance when I die, because I don't have kids and my brother doesn't have kids, and who needs the money from that? It could be a triplex. After I do my addition, it will be pretty easy to make a triplex out of it. And it's on the same footprint now. Now, there are issues having to do with the size of my lot, because I'm in a non-conforming undersized lot. So maybe I can't do that. I can do an ADU. And I'm planning to actually.
That really opens the way back to an area we've had a bunch of questions about. And hopefully this panel can clear up about affordability. How do we get affordability? What's the difference between this 15% requirements and things like that that are being required of private builders? And how we get a lot of affordability and affordability that is for a long time. So the difference between what the town could build, what the Housing Alliance could build, and what the new, the revisions are requiring of private builders, that people have a hard time understanding that, and I understand it because we have worked years to try to get a handle on this. But I hope you can address that and clarify. There were a number of questions about that. With the cost of construction being so high, what makes something affordable? And I think the first thing is what makes something affordable is the first question, part of that question. But if you could address that constellation of concerns, that would be great.
Okay, all right. So one of the things I want to start off by saying is that all housing, all affordable housing will require some subsidized funding in order for housing to be built and for those rents to be made affordable. So subsidized housing is something that is pretty common in our culture, in our country. Actually, single family homes are subsidized and have been since 1950. You get a mortgage tax credit every year. That's a subsidy. So our housing has been subsidized across the board. So we need to have subsidized housing in our town. Now, many developers won't build affordable housing because they can't afford to build. Somebody mentioned the cost of building. So most developers' model is a profit-based model. They need a return on their investment and as quickly as possible. So you have other organizations that are available to build affordable housing. Ones that are established by a more of a broader base bottom line of community oriented and it's a nonprofits. So you can operate with a slightly different model of return on investment. Return on investment will still all be required. So the thing about a subsidized home is that maybe that comes through grants from the state. Maybe it comes through as REPCO through the federal government. And then they operate using those subsidies to follow the strict requirements that HUD gives them as a result of that Section 8 that they're operating under, right? But if you're going to build housing that's outside of the federal government, the state has some subsidies. There's private foundations that have subsidies. I know as a Woodstock Housing Alliance founder, there's a tremendous amount of subsidized access of funds for building properties once a project has been identified. And those usually come from either public or private foundations. So that's the question about subsidizing and how that's made affordable. Now, in the code, when you write in the code, you have to write in for the developer. So that's where you get the how much people don't know what AMI stands for, and so we'll try to acknowledge what that stands for. And I'm going to get the support of people that see area median income. So what that means is that the county every year gets a data point of what is the median income of our county, and then that's the AMI, okay. And then in the code, it's written that there's 80 to 120%, but it's 80 if you're purchasing and 100 other way around. 80 for rental and 120% if you're purchasing. So we have different standards for purchasing and different standards for rental. So that's in that code written that way for developers. But once it's developed, once the property exists, then it's a matter of 30%. It's a measure of 30% of a person's income is what will be the measure for what would be affordable for that rent, okay? So if they, depending on what that income is, that rent will fluctuate based on that individual's income. What is not accurate?
It's not based on the rent, the maximum rent based on the.
Well, it is if you're operating under the AMI program, but they're like, Woodstock Housing Alliance, we will operate under, we will take applications. It's not the code, but we're still addressing what is affordable, what is the definition of affordable. And so, okay, we'll stay within the code and we're not gonna deviate from it. So it's the measure of code, that measure of what is affordable will be based on what we're talking about then, the AMI, 80% for rental. And you apply your income to that 80%, to that formula, and then your rent is determined. So Jeff is gonna further elaborate this.
It'll be a test after.
Yeah. And I'm gonna fail.
So this is how it's calculated. So every year, housing produces for each county in the country an AMI, average median income. And it calculates it on one person family, two person family, three person family, all of that.
Area median.
Yes, area median income. So I'm going to go from 2020 because that's the last time that I could find the area median income for Ulster County in 2020 was 47,000 for one person. Okay. That means that if that person was going to rent a house, you would take that 47,000 to 80%. So the 47,000 is 80% number. So they would.
About 40,000.
I'm going to do 48,000. Okay.
Yes.
I know it's very confusing. So I'm getting there. But there will be tests later. Okay, so let's go with 48,000 because it's more. So if the AMI for a single person is $48,000, then the most that an affordable unit can be rented for is 1/3 of that, which would be $16,000 per year, or roughly $1,200 per month. Okay, that's the requirement for an affordable unit. So if the unit is one of the required affordable units, that's the most that the owner can charge for rent, and that $1,200 includes rent, utilities, whole thing. Okay, so that's what that means. Now it's different numbers for different size families, but that's what that means. So when we put affordable requirements in the code, that limits what an owner can rent that building for. That makes it more difficult for someone to build a unit. Because if you can't make money on a unit, you're not going to build a unit, right? So what we've done to try to encourage that is we have to give back a little bit to the developers. So it's 15%. They can do 85% that's market rate and 15% that's affordable. Okay. If we said, hey, you gotta do 90% affordable, nobody would build anything. Right? Nobody would build anything. You can ask for it, but no one's gonna do it on a profit-based model. Now, as Kirk said, there are non-profit-based models too that exist. We've seen RUPCO, we'll continue to have RUPCO. Woodstock Housing Alliance is a non-profit-based model too. So we'll have things done that way. So as far as encouraging affordability, we have some requirements. Those requirements cannot be so stringent that no one has to ever use it. But the ones that will be probably more likely built are the ones that are affordable through nonprofit program. So everyone clear on what it means by affordable. We're not talking Section 8 housing. We're talking working people, affordable housing. Modern housing, there's lots of names for it. Modern housing, workforce housing, those we're looking at.
What was the 80%? For profit, absolutely, yeah, we're not gonna, we can't go back and forth with this, but I just wanted to say, because it is very complicated. When someone comes in with a housing proposal, whether it's a subdivision or it could be a multifamily housing project, specific type of project, like, say, a Repco project, they have to have an affordable housing plan. So that, and there are very specific requirements for what needs to be in that plan. This is based on what is done in other towns in Ulster County. We used we benefited from some of those other templates to help us define what would be in those plans. That goes to the planning board. That's part of their approval process, that plan has to be laid out. So a lot of these things are project specific. What isn't is our up to 80% AMI for a rental property and up to 120% AMI if it's for purpose.
We haven't talked about FRDs yet. Is that going to be a separate topic?
The question is, as far as if someone to define versus PR, why are we changing it? You say that FRD versus PRD, we need someone on the panel to define that. Why are we changing it?
So I'm going to explain what the FRD is and the PRD is first. In today's code, there's a thing called a planned residential district that is essentially the model that Repco was built on. As we know, it took them 8 years to get approval to build that. And they had to scale down. They were going to build a lot more affordable units, and they couldn't, for whatever reason. And they have a lot more parking than we think they should have. And I drive in there, to me, it's a parking lot with residences on it, it's always residential with parking. An FRD is kind of a newer model that's being used statewide to encourage affordable housing projects.
What does it stand for? FRD?
FRD is floating residential district. Okay, so the story gets complicated. Again, we'll discuss later. So we did not want to put in the code exactly where affordable housing could go because we don't know where it wants to go. If we put a district in the code saying this is one place you can build affordable housing, that's saying you can't build it over here, go over here, go over here. Okay, but make it floating. What that means is the town board has the discretion to look at the plan, consider the plan, and consider where it's going to be. And if that town board believes it's an appropriate plan for that area, for that district, they can change that zone, whatever it is, to be appropriate for residential affordable housing. Okay, that the town board is the only one that can change zoning. That's why it's got to be up to the town board to make that change. Once they make that change, that area becomes buildable for the residential development that has a very high requirements for affordability. I believe it's 60%. And we'll talk about more details of that later. Okay, go for it. Kirk has more details.
So under the current code, the PRD is mostly in control of the development. The developer controls the conversation. There's very little that is possible for to have it any other way. The floating residential district has a tremendous amount of criteria associated with it. The rules are established up front, so a developer understands by reading the code what's expected of them should they want to come into this town and do any affordable housing development. So that clarity is for the developer, that certainty is for the developer. And that's what some people may be concerned about. Well, we had to define it specifically so that we could maintain control. That's why those definitions are there. Those definitions are strict. If somebody is going to do affordable housing and floating residential district, 60%, 60% must be affordable of all the homes that are built in that district. Okay, that's a tremendous size. That's huge, right? So there's other elements like that that are very strict. 50% of the property needs to be put into conservation-based development, meaning permanently, left alone and respected. There needs to be governance of that land within the plan, such as a housing, homeowners association, or it's given to a local conservatory, land conservancy like Woodstock Land Conservancy. So there's rules of that nature that must be applied to. So the FRD has high criteria, high bar to match to adhere to. That's to discourage most developers to come into our team. And then really to encourage only those developers that are committed to what we are committed to in this town. That's why the rules are set in the way they're set. And the floating residential district is a more common use application rather than a PRD, which was a 20th century model that has been basically outdated. And that's one of the reasons why it was brought into the code as in its current state. Neighboring towns, Rhinebeck has a floating residential district. There's some other towns that have recently adopted the same type of measure into their land use law. And so we are proposing that in the applications. Anything else? We're good. Next question.
We have a couple of questions related to short-term rentals. Why aren't STR laws being considered in this law? And how are STRs mentioned in this law?
The why they're not is that our charter was land use, not short-term or long-term rental. STRs need to be regulated better than they're done today in town. We all understand that, though it's not part of our charter. I'm also in the zoning review committee. We're looking at STR laws now. I promise you, we will change the STR laws to be much more strict, much more limited than they are today. We have some ideas. I can't talk about them. That's a different conversation. What we have said in our law around STRs is that an accessory dwelling unit, which is allowed today, by the way, everybody in town can build an accessory dwelling unit today under the base code with just a building permit. Already allowed at every place in town. So we've not added that or changed that. So when
Just only 6% of the current properties in our town since 1998 have ADUs on them. 6%.
So the perfect thing, I'll say from the microphone. Today, anyone can build an ADU, 6% of people in town have done it. So we're not changing that, we're not changing how many people can build it. What we are saying is if you build an accessory dwelling unit, it cannot be an STR. Period. Done.
You are changing.
We're changing it away from being an STR. But you can still build it. It's gotta be a long-term rental. And the county that's the county advised requirement that we accepted.
How will you enforce it?
And enforcement's a whole different topic, we can talk about it later.
That's a big issue.
It's a big issue, we'll talk about it later, I will say one thing, I've looked at the county plan, county budget, they put $30,000 to support. Yes, exactly, they put $30,000 into the county budget to support enforcement of STR laws in all towns in the county. Okay, so the county is looking at this problem. Okay, another aspect of short-term rentals, they're not allowed in any multi-unit building. Period. Okay, so restricted severely where they can be and what can be put into STRs. Now, as I've said before, the zoning review committee is looking at the STR law, and I'm going to just say this as a member of that committee. We do not believe the current STR law is the right law. We believe we can make modifications and make it better and reduce the impact of STRs on our town. But that's got to come as a separate looking at the law.
That's a clear answer. Thank you.
So a question about maps. Will there be maps to show where FRDs and multifamily homes are allowed?
We have not changed any maps, period. The maps, the zoning map you see today is the zoning map you'll see tomorrow. We have not changed any zones. If you look at today's map, if If you look at anything that's in R5, R3, R1.1, anything smaller than that, that's where multifamily houses can be built today. Period. That's where they'll be able to build under the proposed law, because they're also allowed in 5s or 3s, etc. But we allow smaller size of those units. We don't have, you can't build a 12-unit one anymore. You can today. Okay, so it's not, we haven't changed that part of it. What was it part? Oh, FRDs, because it's a floating residential district. It floats. It goes where it's appropriate to be according to the plan that's approved by the town board. If they find that, you know, someplace out in Willow is great for it, then they'll put it there. Someplace in Xenia, they'll put it there. I'm not saying that there are places like that, but it's up to the town board to decide where an FRD goes, where it's appropriate for affordable housing to go. My guess is it won't be Willow and it won't be Xenia, but that's just my guess.
Right now,
Judy
Everybody's
wanted
saying
to.
the
The mics are garbled, so we need.
Yeah. Judy has getting questions on the chat in the Zoom, so I'm gonna let you first question.
Back up to the top, because they're all through here.
And if there's
Well, if they're the same question, then we won't. But we've been getting a lot of comments about the problems with the Zoom. Okay. Are the new zoning laws being established only to create affordable housing here? And obviously, we already made that clear. Not just that, because also about environmental protection. The two things together, and that's what we really need, and that's what we're gonna be trying to do. Is affordable housing even possible? Good question, we'll do our best. Yeah.
Yeah, I just wanna say something about that, because I'm also on the housing committee. So the housing committee has brought to the town board a recommendation that we join the county's Housing Smart Communities program. And this is another way that we can support and develop housing plan in our community to bring more affordable housing in our town. So it can't all be done. Zoning is just kind of setting out the parameters and the regulations. And the housing committee is going to be next year engaging the community even more. And Catherine may want to speak to that, but it really does go hand in hand with this one. No? Okay.
Don't speak to the folks.
Is that better?
I don't know.
Slower, I need to speak slower because I'm sorry. So one thing that people have talked about is, can the town build affordable housing itself? And the answer is no. Under New York state law, a county, a city, and a village can have an affordable housing authority, a housing authority. Special villages.
Which means there's a large.
Large village. So those are the only municipal entities that can actually build affordable housing as a municipality. We can't do it. We can partner with a nonprofit to do it. But that's the only way we can do it through the town. We can get grants to do it as a town, so we can help a nonprofit do it with. So again, there's been talks about, we're gonna build affordable housing in Woodstock. We legally cannot do it. And
No, well,
are we done?
yeah.
Okay, that's an answer.
Yeah.
Found out the town.
Well, we know that there's very little.
Yeah.
We know there's very little of the town land that is buildable and accessible, and what can be done with it is a question that is to be seen. Okay, I understand that a number of comments from the public have been incorporated into the proposal, but when can I look at the comments? When I look at the documents, I don't see the changes. Will an edited document be posted? Within the time before the town board adopts it, we will certainly have to do that. This is an ongoing process. And we got a huge number of questions, many of which weren't actually about the code. They were about enforcement, they were about the CRs, they were things we can't, that we either put into the needs a policy or needs something from the building revision committee, or not really relevant, which sometimes happen. But the ones that are relevant, And we have been working on a document with responses, but we're trying to get this thing done. That's a priority.
I just want to speak a little bit about the process because it is confusing. So when people give us comments and questions, and some of them result in changes to our recommendations, they don't happen instantaneously. I think is what you were saying. So we produced a document on October 3rd. We're taking comments on that document. The results of the comments, they're being evaluated. Any changes from those comments will go into another version, which will go to the town board for their consideration for adoption. But and they will have to consider those proposals and decide whether or not they want to accept them and vote on them.
Okay, can I take
Let me just say one more thing on that, which is that, people have said that we have not responded to comments that were received on the second draft. The truth is, we did respond to comments. I don't think we posted those responses. We have a 40-page document that lists all of our responses to all of those comments. It's not been published yet. That'll be published, I think, soon, I think. I'm not sure exactly when.
Yeah, and real quick, we just. Thank you. You know, this is the third version, and at the end of each version, we had a long period of review of the comments that came in, version 1 to version 2. And the list of changes is what I was gonna say. Each time we submitted another version, we listed all the changes as a result of the comments that came in. So we had a list of 36 changes based on the version 1 to version 2. We had a list of 18 major changes from the list of version 2 to the version 3 now. So those lists were made available of what changes were made as a result of the comments that came in. We will do the same thing again with the list of revisions that are made as a result of the comments that come in. The things that have happened here today, the questions that have come forward, which are many of them, that's going to be incorporated into the comments. This is not going to waste your time, okay? Even though we maybe didn't get to your questions, to answer your question, these are being taken and being brought in and incorporated into the process that we're engaged in.
A lot more questions.
We know there's a lot more questions, and as more than you are aware. So as far as I'm concerned.
Sorry, not.
We're doing what's up.
That's so rude. Rude. No, it's public, we know.
Not a publicly heard meeting. That is. We'll either deal with them now, I mean, it's already 3:40. We'll either deal with them now or we'll deal with them. We'll keep going. Okay, online. While I understand that the footprint will not change, how would you address the additional cars and permanent surfaces and water use when a building is converted from a duplex to a fourplex? Good question. I don't think it's gonna happen very often, but if it does, it has to go to the planning board. The planning board will have to look at the question of additional cars and impervious surfaces. The health department already has requirements for the septic. And it may very well be that the septic would have to be adjusted or not. Or it simply can't be done because the septic situation will not permit it. But that's the kind of thing that planning board actually has to look at.
Yeah. I can say something more about that. So one thing about the parking and anything associated with parking with a multi-unit building. The revised code has a tremendous amount of criteria for screening of those cars, for where those cars are in relationship to the neighbors, and proper screening for that also. So there's a pretty strict list of criteria that's listed for a multi-unit building to be built to adhere to and not infringe upon the character of the neighborhood. And that's articulated in it. And the other thing too is that we've given the planning board the ability to evaluate. It's not just said number of car spaces per unit, but giving the planning board the ability to make adjustments to that parking plan also is in the power of the planning board.
see if there are
And
any
then
more.
just to follow up on that, you know, as I said before, you can drive into Woodstock Highlands, it's a parking lot with housing, it's a housing area with parking. And all of that parking is impervious. And it's not gonna happen in the future, it will not be impervious in the future.
Yeah, and so our goal is to minimize, parking, required parking for new housing, and to, as Derek said, to have, all of the parking be done, with, impervious, environmentally sound materials and impervious, but not impervious. Unless an ADA requires it. But I do want to just say one thing about parking. We have an alternative transportation. We have a complete streets committee in this town. They proposed a policy that was passed by the town board. We are incorporating the consideration of the complete streets policy of this town into every multifamily development. And that's something that the planning board is going to do.
We did get a bunch of questions that really aren't for this panel or this, today. They're related to other planning board activities and other, but they're not zoning questions particularly. But there have been questions about enforcement and about the policies that we're recommending. So I wanted to just give you a sense of that. These policy recommendations were submitted to the town board, so they're a public record. Not sure where they can be found, but we'll work on getting them up there. But the major import is to get training for all the appropriate departments and boards in the new code. So that they understand what it is they're supposed to be working on. That's a top priority. To have a certified wetlands inspector, which we don't have, and which the planning board needs to use for in many circumstances. Updates to the whole application procedure for the building department. Increases in fees to cover all the additional work that is required as more is being required of these developments and buildings. It takes everybody more time and work. Then we have, the SDR enforcement, which basically the housing committee and have been pressuring the county to pick up the enforcement costs, and it looks like that's in the budget. We're hoping that will come through. You can certainly take it upon yourselves to pressure your county legislator. Yes, although it should be in the budget, it's still fine. Another one is to establish a town housing fund. While we can't have a municipal housing authority, we can set up a housing fund. And we're working on ways to get funds into that fund from the sale of real estate and other sources, so that we can support building going forward, and we can, have some carrots to go with the sticks to go for the developers. Other incentives regarding ADUs, we've recommended, for example, that if somebody builds an ADU and rents it affordably, that it would be removed from their assessment until they stop renting affordably. The things that require some tracking and registration, but they are all tools, and we're hoping that the town will take those on. And then ways to manage affordable housing, and depending on what's being built, different entities might manage the affordable housing. We recommended a grant writer so that we can take advantage of more grants, and to continue outreach to increase awareness of residents of all of these issues. We've all on these boards and committees put in a lot of time to learn about it, and it is thick and detailed and difficult. No one is saying that it isn't, but we'd like to have more efforts in terms of providing more community education to make it a little clearer for people.
Well, I don't know if you covered this already, Susan, but one of the things that the housing committee has been working on with those policy recommendations is the potential for other funding opportunities for the town. You mentioned grants. There's something called the Community Preservation Act that we're going to be exploring again. We have in the past, hasn't borne fruit, but it's a way for the town to have a percentage of, housing costs above the median price that someone pays, a small percentage go into a fund for open space, or we're saying for open space and housing. And this is something that is being considered. A bunch of us are going to a conference on Monday at Mohawk that's talking about affordable housing and open space and how the two can work together, and that there's room enough for both. And this is a technique and a policy tool that many communities are looking into, and we're hopefully going to be one of them.
It occurs to me that this might be useful for people to understand about the process. Deborah just mentioned open space. There are different definitions of open space. If you look in the Vulcan area table, it says a certain amount of open space for a certain amount of building coverage. Doesn't say what that open space is. It's probably going to be lawns and gardens and things like that. The definition, I'm going to argue, I'm talking about the process we're going through here. I'm going to argue for another definition, which is conservation space, that is different from open space. So that when we do a conservation subdivision, it is clear that this is not ballparks, golf courses, or even lawn. It's conserved space. And that's different from a more generic kind of open space. But that recognition that there's a thing in the definitions that we need to refine is a process that comes from partly the questions people ask. And that's why this process is so important. And anybody who says this is opaque is not paying attention.
Thank you, Judy. I agree with you that it's confusing to all of us, that we believe we talk about conservation space, we never define it. I think we all agree we need to define that in the next version.
Nothing else on the chat.
Right, well, I have one question I thought was worth asking. We have tons of questions that we didn't get to, but as I said, we'll try to respond. Is there anything that surrounding towns have done in terms of zoning that can be helpful? And I think Woodstock could be a model.
So when we took the plan, because we're required to have our plan reviewed by the Ulster County Planning Board. That's a requirement for any zoning changes. They made some very significant recommendations to us. We accepted those recommendations, actually requirements, requirements, we accepted those requirements. Their overall assessment was that this plan could be a model for other rural towns in the council. They like this plan. They approve this plan. They believe it's a good plan for rural communities. That's different than Kingston. Kingston has a different set of requirements, different set of ways to get affordable housing that we can't do. So we have looked at other things. Our planning professional knows throughout the state what people are doing, and she's brought that knowledge to this development. So we haven't necessarily looked specifically at Hurley or those other ones because they're behind us. And many of the local rural towns don't have comprehensive plan yet. So that's, we're ahead in this process, and we're leading the county in this process.
I've met with Saugerties about our initiative. I've met with Olive about our initiative, and both those towns follow in line with what Jeff has just stated. They're looking to Woodstock for some of the things that we're proposing. In a couple of weeks, I'll be going to Red Hook to meet with the housing committee there to discuss what they're doing and what we've been doing. So again, Woodstock is a leader in this, and it's mostly because of the leadership that started back in the mid-teens when we got the comprehensive plan going. And from there, we got housing committee and zoning revisions committee, and it just created this whole initiative that we're still experiencing today. So we can thank our town board for that. Sorry, what? Yeah, and complete streets as far as that element is incorporated into from the comprehensive plan as well.
There's a question, a follow-up about the floating residential zone. Does it mean I can no longer rely on the zoning rules in my neighborhood, because at any point the town board might decide to change that. And put a big development where I thought I couldn't do that.
You know, understand that this is a process that first the developer has to come to the town board. The town board has to review it and say, okay, this is feasible. It then gets referred to the planning board, which then goes through its entire review process. It then goes back to the town board and so on. So that's a multiple long time, multiple months, maybe years in the making of any kind of initiative like that to take place in our town.
With lots of public hearings.
With a tremendous amount of input from the public all through that process. So anybody in any neighborhood will have the opportunity to let your thoughts be known through various ways along that process. But it's a very, very strict process that is highly complex and that's intentional. Again, to make it difficult, right? So.
I think it's, you know, as Kirk says, it's a difficult process, but I think the difference between their process and the current process is that as they work through it, and as the town accepts it, and as the residents accept that, it becomes very clear to the builder what they need to do, and when they need to do it, and how they need to do it. You know, that makes a more certain development for that residential district.
Okay, I think we're gonna wrap up. I hope that was helpful to people, but we can make it. We didn't make it to our panel, we that were. Thanks, everyone.
We're going to address all the questions that were here.
Most of the questions we combine into questions that we feel have been dealt with. If you have a follow-up, we can tell the question, what the answer that's relevant, please come up and we'll take those. Because we'll try to follow up. There were some questions that weren't for this panel, and others we hope would be addressed in the course of answering.
So for those of you who are here still listening, in response to that last question, we're gonna go through every card where there was a written question. And if it was already addressed, we'll acknowledge that if it needs to be addressed.